there's first of all saying what it isn't, and then there's saying what it is and how that might be accessible, at least for an ordinary person, to kind of start to encompass, to include it in their world, in their view of the world. So what it isn't, even that's quite a subtle thing, because you see, you can't talk about rebirth separate from the Buddhist view of the mind and the Buddhist view of self. Because in the West, rebirth is perhaps better described as the idea of reincarnation. And if you think reincarnation implies there's an entity who transmigrates, there's a me that goes from life to life. And, so I am an entity, I'm defined, I'm fixed, I'm this soul, this entity, and I hop from body to body. Well, you see, there's no me, that's the thing. There's no me who can hop from body to body. Everything is process, everything is stream. That is the Buddhist view. So talking about rebirth without at least some, not profound understanding, at least some glimmer of a Buddhist understanding of the self is really impossible, because otherwise you end up with an eternalist theory of a self who is going to just continue experiencing things forever. But you don't. That's not the way the world works, or you as a being works. You're a stream, like all things are a stream. So that is the very first, in a way, the thing to remove. Because that then brings us to, well, the trying to establish how people might relate to it. And there's two ends to this. You can approach it, and probably need to approach it in two ends. In a way, a kind of philosophical, reasoned explanation of why only rebirth is possible, actually. But at this other time, the other side, also not an emotional explanation, but one that's like grounded in your everyday experience. So like almost, So on the first one, and people need to at least hear about this, because, by the way, changing your worldviews takes a long time. Our assumptions about the world are embedded in our language, they're reflected back to us by our culture, by cultural patterns, and so on and so forth. So to really deeply, it's almost like to deeply realize what rebirth is, you'll be very, very wise, because you'll have really cracked the whole, fiction of self. So rebirth, your confidence in rebirth grows over time, one might say. But anyway, to begin with, for the philosophical side, it's that the reasoning which is taught in our texts about how the consciousness is formless, it's not physical, and it's that which knows, and that cannot be produced by non-sentient causes. There cannot be a difference, an opposition between causes and results, because there ever is in nature. The causes and the results have a similarity of nature. Wherever you look in the world, in the universe, that's it. Disparate causes and disparate results cannot be connected. There's no dependent connection between them. So that which gives rise to consciousness in this moment, this present moment of consciousness, must be, its chief cause must be a preceding moment of consciousness. That consciousness, of course, is interacting, or seems to be interacting, with physical conditions, but nevertheless the key determining cause, consciousness, has to arise from a preceding moment of consciousness. That's the way it works. And there's no discontinuity, because consciousness also suddenly can't just appear from nowhere. Nothing appears from nothing. So based upon reasoning on cause and effect, there has to be a prior moment of consciousness for this moment of consciousness. And no matter how far back one goes, that is always the case. There can't be a moment where suddenly there was nothing and then there's something, or that somehow there was matter and that by magic manifested consciousness. They have an entirely different nature. So the first moment of this life, there is consciousness. Of course, it's not awake because the senses have not yet unfolded, but it's there. And that has come from the last moment of the previous existence, which is the bardo experience. And that going back to the end of the previous life. And there's no beginning to this. It's another thing that people have fear about, because rebirth actually means there's no beginning. And we want beginnings and we want ends, because we want things to be tidy and graspable to our ego. The Buddhist sense of timelessness, of boundlessness, is very frightening and overwhelming for people until you learn to swim, and then you're completely relaxed about it. So that, from a philosophical point of view, rebirth is the only way to explain how consciousness arises. Everything else is some kind of voodoo magic explanation. But even that takes a lot of reasoning, a lot of thought to understand and to come to see. But at the same time, one can be working on it from this other angle, which is what is happening every day. My mind never remains the same, but my mind never stops. My mind never disappears. There's no interruption to the stream of experience. But who I will be tomorrow is not the same as who I am now. But who I will be tomorrow is not somebody just come out of blank air, out of nothingness, out of space. There's a continuity with this, but not the sameness. And that's the key. Continuity, not repetition, not sameness. Change and continuity. They seem opposed from a dualistic sense, but they're one reality. And it's the way the whole world works. So tomorrow I'll be reborn. In terms of who I am now, this will not be the same, but it will not be an entirely new person. What is arising in my mind now, my experiences, my emotions, my thoughts, in a way give rise to the being I'll be in the very next moment. Because rebirth is not life to life only, day to day only, it's moment to moment only. Always there is rebirth. Always there is rebirth going on. The bardo state between birth and death is also reduplicated in every moment between thoughts. Thoughts arise, and if one is able to become still enough in meditation, one can experience this tiny gap out of which then the next thought manifests. There's consciousness there. Consciousness is sometimes manifesting as thought and sometimes not, as just a stillness. So there is a continuity but continual change. So the more one works by experiencing and observing this in one's practice and daily life, the more in a way one starts to feel rebirth as a continuing backdrop to all one's experience. So the big rebirth, death to next life, in a way shrinks in importance. Because one can see it's just a more dramatic version of what is continually the case now. So some people develop confidence in rebirth solely through the philosophical reasonings. Some people just gradually develop confidence in rebirth by just seeing how it's going on all the time anyway, and it's no big deal. That's the way one should to approach the rebirth. But to begin with, one has to dispel one's notion that rebirth means, like, for instance, somebody would think, oh, great, I'm going to have more good times in the future. You won't have more you will not be there. It won't be you any longer. You have mutated, just like it's not even you tomorrow. So, that is, because quite a lot of the New Age kind of stuff that's floating around is like, oh, good, and I'll get to choose who I am in my next life, and I'll have these lessons to learn. This is just fairy tale nonsense. You won't even remember who you were. When we talk about past life memories, they're extremely rare, because I can't even remember who I was when I was 1 or 2 in this life. So much is bound up in terms of memory with associations through language and visual sights and so on. In a way, the memories are there, but they're inaccessible to most of us. So it's said that to actually remember past lives is really a very unusual spiritual attainment that very few people have. And then occasionally maybe young children who've died in kind of violent accidents or died suddenly, they can sometimes in their early years have memories of past life. They're the only ordinary people who seem to be able to do so. For other people, it's a rare attainment and requires a great yogic experience. So one should not look to those things. And most accounts of past lives in the West are probably fantasy. Not all, but many. Based on wishing to be Shirley MacLaine in one's past life.